All right. Welcome to the podcast, Jalissa. Today's guest is a true example of what it means to rise from the ashes. Just over 2 years ago, she was navigating one of the most painful seasons of her life: her husband's addiction, financial instability, becoming a single mom, and the uncertainty of divorce that left her with less than $2,000 in her bank account. She was in survival mode, balancing newborn life and toddler life, all while working multiple jobs just to keep her family afloat. So she is the true definition of rebuilding from the ground up, and I'm so excited to have you, Jalissa.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here and
Yeah.
share a little more of my story and yeah, just connect in all of the ups and downs of life.
Yeah, and when I talked to you, you told me that you hadn't ever really shared your full story, right?
I haven't. I have shared a big part of my life on social media,
Yeah.
and it was just a means for me to kind of start healing, and it kind of became a big part of my life that I really didn't expect. Um, but there's a lot of details that, I've never really shared outside of close friends and family.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So with your social media, you shared more um, kind of moving on, the aspect of moving on as a single mom and dating again. But you've never really shared the backstory, correct?
Yeah.
Of everything that
Yeah.
happened.
It's funny. I had kind of a profound moment on social media. And I think it was interesting because things were happening years prior. And um, no one knew about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shared little tidbits. And then I had one moment where it was kind of the big life changing moment.
What was
And it
that
was,
for you?
yeah, it was when there was a video going around that talked about starting our next adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a video of me taking my, family pictures off the wall. And it is so funny because I made the jankiest photo collage of me and my two girls. And I taped the backs of them and I thumbtacked them to my wall because it's all I had at the time.
Yeah.
And it just showed me and my two girls standing in front of like a new wall.
I remember that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that was just
It
me
was
and the
powerful.
girls. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just the moment that everyone was kind of like, whoa, like I don't think anyone really expected that.
Because they didn't know,
They
right?
didn't know.
Which I think is so common when you go through divorce or betrayal or whatever it is, to not have people know, to
Yeah.
be suffering in silence, doing it on your own, crying,
Yep.
and just like, God help me, I don't know where I'm going, but I know that this isn't where I'm supposed to be. So I'm
Yep.
going to move forward. So that was
Yep.
kind of your statement, and people
Yeah.
saw. Did that draw people to you? They wanted to see more of your story.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was the moment where it's like, I think people realize it's just such a connecting thing for people to know, like, oh, she's going through something like that.
Yeah.
Or, oh, wow. And then I just remember I just have always had a pull to share my story,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know how.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I didn't know how. So I tried to do it in a way that's like a real raw and vulnerable side of healing, but also protecting everyone that I can.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, you want to protect them, but you're also like, I have a voice. I want to share this because
Yeah.
I feel that same way. I'm like, there's no way I'm the only one experiencing this.
Yeah.
There's no way we're the only family struggling with pornography in their home.
Yep.
Or, infidelity or struggles financially. Like, there's no way. And I just feel like everything on social media is so sugar coated, and it's like everyone's highlight reel. And I couldn't do it. I was like, I just want to be real. I want to be me. I want to put it out there and be authentic. And so that's actually what drew me to you, because I met you years ago. We used to CrossFit together.
Yep.
You just did your CrossFit competition
Yep.
yesterday. You guys, she's like so sore. But yeah, that's how I met you then. But we really didn't, like, I always saw you and thought, there's something special about that girl. And this was when you were with your ex.
Mm-hmm.
I told you, I remember you like walking on your hands down the turf, and I wanted to do that so bad. And I'm like, she's so cool.
Yeah.
But I never really knew you. We never really
Nope.
connected deeply until we connected through our suffering and our pain from
Yep.
being vulnerable on social media. So yeah, I
Yep.
love that you do that. I love that you're authentic and that you share that. I know this is probably going to be hard to share it for the first time,
Yeah.
but I think that it'll be really impactful for people to see where you came from. Okay, so people know that you started over.
Mm-hmm.
They know that, you're a single mom online and that you're dating now. But let's talk a little bit about that backstory and what drew you to, like, what was that moment where you were like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to create something new out of my life.
Yeah. I've talked a little bit about the pornography. But the pornography use really didn't even come out until the one big life-changing moment.
Yeah.
And I think this is, again, the moment that my life changed. You know, you find out something within your marriage and it's just an immediate, like, my life will never be the same. And I don't know how I will ever move on from it.
Yeah.
Right? It's that earth-shattering moment that's like, no way I'll feel whole again.
Yeah.
And
I've been there.
Yeah. So mine felt like a complete 180. Like, I look back and there was a little bit of like, okay, maybe, you know, and in hindsight, it's just interesting how you replay things over and over and over again. Right?
Oh, trying to make sense of it,
Yeah.
right?
You'll always try to piece it together.
Yeah.
And it'll never fully make sense.
But,
so 2020, is when I had found out that there was an instance, that happened between my husband at the time and one of my nannies that was working at my house at the time. And there was a sexual act that was done by my husband to my nanny at the time.
Yeah.
And I think what's so hard is my 15-month-old daughter was on the floor at the time, and I was actually working in the next room. So I think what's hard is, like, it was in my home, and I didn't even find out about it until a month after the fact.
Yeah.
And the reason that this is so personal and there's so many ties to this is that it was also a family member. And so you can imagine the break in my family dynamic.
Yeah.
And I not only found out about the betrayal itself, I found out from my dad coming over to my house. And
your dad found out before you.
Yeah. And that experience was like, I don't think I can ever put in the words like how traumatic that felt. Because I remember my dad coming in, just, you can imagine.
An angry father.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
protecting his daughter, which good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And given the circumstances, she was underage. And I don't think my first thought when he told me, I said, what the heck? Like, someone's accusing him of what?
You're like, this isn't real.
No, like, not real. No way. Like, and I remember looking at my husband's face and I knew. And I was like, I couldn't even process. I froze, like, absolutely froze.
Yeah.
And, you know, my dad is horrified. He's terrified. You know, it's his daughter and his granddaughter, and, you know, you extend it to a family matter, and it's one of the most horrible experiences. And I just remember that night thinking, I don't know how my marriage is going to make it. You know, we might face serious legal repercussions. You know, there might be charges pressed, weird, you know, even from the church standpoint, right? Like, what does it make me now, right? What does it mean for my daughter? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my family? And just as a little backstory, like, my ex-husband has a really, really traumatic past.
Yeah.
Like, he's been through things that I wouldn't wish on anyone. And I think that's what made it harder is because I've always wanted to take care of him. I always wanted to like give him the love that he never had.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also a trauma response for me as well.
For sure.
You know, like you're betrayed. And I remember like just like out of body experience, right? My dad left. My life is completely up in flames. I went to my sister's house. It's 1 a.m., right? And I just remember calling my brother-in-law and I'm like, you have to go sit with him. Like, I'm scared that he's going to hurt himself.
Yeah.
Because how do you dig your way out of this? Right. Like, it's so scary because I'm like, yeah, what? You know, like, where do we go?
Yeah. I think that this is the hardest part about betrayal that people don't talk about, is that the person that's betrayed feels like they have to pick up all these pieces that they didn't create.
Yep.
And you're like, what do I even do? How do we get out of this? Like,
Yep.
how do we move forward? And I think that there's a lot of times, you know, where you can move forward together, you can heal together, but then there's times when you can't.
Yeah.
You can't because the other person isn't ready to.
Yeah.
And so you have to move on your own.
Yep. And I think that's where it started, right?
Yeah.
Is I remember I went home the next morning and I gave him a hug.
Yeah.
And
because you have so much love.
Yeah.
You're like, I want to love you. Yeah.
But that was also traumatic for me
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, I was just betrayed and I'm over here trying. I revolve my life around trying to make him feel okay, right? And so that's where it did. I wanted to protect his reputation, our marriage, my daughter's, you know, and you can imagine I kept this so private for 3 years,
Yeah.
right? Like from our best friends. I mean, I felt shame. And I think that was the hardest part, is like, I didn't do anything and I felt shame.
Where do you
years.
feel like that shame came from?
I think I questioned myself. I think that's the first thing when you go through betrayal, is you ask, like, what did I do wrong? Right? Like, what did I do to, you know, for you to go out or seek that? Or
was I not enough? Was I not good enough?
Yeah. And even then, why not tell me, right? Why not come to me? Like, do you not trust me? Do you not, like, it's so hard. You just think it's a very self-centered thinking,
Mm-hmm.
which is good and bad, right?
Yeah.
So,
because you want to correct anything. Like, someone that has a good heart is like, let me correct what I did wrong.
Yeah.
So you want to correct what you did wrong, but then it's also, like you said, it's kind of a trauma response of never feeling good enough, right? Of taking on that blame and that burden.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, why can't as women we just be like, I'm the worst mistake you ever made. You just gave up on the best thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But as women, we don't think that. We don't think like, oh, you know,
yeah,
you really lost here.
Yeah.
We think, what could I have done different? Why wasn't I enough? Like,
Yeah.
I hear this time and time and again from women that they're looking for what's wrong with them. And that breaks my heart.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's what, I think innately we want to create good environments
Mm-hmm.
and spaces and love and trust and all of those things. And so I feel like you go into overdrive then. Like, you're overly trying to prove your worth,
Mm-hmm.
to try and show. Like, mine for me became like, I want to be the woman that stood by your side.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be that woman.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'm like, what was my intent in that, right? Was it because I was like, I believe in you and I want you to do this? Or was I trying to prove something?
Were you trying to prove that you were good enough?
Yeah. And
that you could get his love.
Yeah.
You could change him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And I was like, I'm going to be the person that doesn't leave you, right? Because everyone in his life up until then was non-existent. So, and I thought, you know, I'm going to be the person that loves him through everything.
Yeah.
And I would have gone to
Which
the ends of the earth
so much about your heart. Like, to me, I'm like, that's a good woman.
Yeah.
It is a good woman. But it doesn't mean that you have to do that to be worthy either.
Yeah.
If there's signs that person's not ready to change or heal or take accountability, then I think that it's time to walk away.
Yeah.
And that's like one of my biggest things, because I know on my page I have been the woman that's chosen to stay through betrayal. And I hear a lot of women, you know, coming to me and saying, you know, very similar things. And I just want to say, like, you don't have to prove it.
Yeah.
Like, if he's not taking accountability, if he's not like working on showing you forgiveness, like, or not forgiveness, showing you like, okay, I'm the one that messed up here. I'm making the change. Like if you're the one as a woman trying to make all those changes,
Yeah.
that's a red flag.
Yeah.
He needs to be the one that's making things right.
Yeah. And looking back, that was never the case.
Yeah.
Never the case. And that's why if I were to say one thing in working through betrayal, is that words mean nothing.
Yep.
You can say you're sorry. You can apologize. You can say, I'll never do it again.
I
You
agree.
can say everything you want. If there's no action, it's not progressing. It's
okay,
not.
I agree with this so much, and this is so important for women that are in the thick of it right
Yep.
now. If his actions have not changed, you need to pay attention to that.
Yep.
Like, take what he is doing, like, take that as like face value.
Yep.
Like, you have to look at what they are doing and be like, and this is how I treat all my relationships now. Like, if somebody is doing things that are not congruent with what they are telling me,
Yep.
I'm like, ooh, okay, noted. I'm taking a step back.
Yeah.
I'm creating a boundary. You don't even need to tell him that you're creating a boundary. You're just like, okay, I need to change.
Yeah.
I don't need to make him change. I don't need to tell him to change. I need to make a change
Yep.
for myself.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest thing that I've grown a tremendous amount in, but I was sold on words for years.
And I think so many
Years.
women are, because we
Yeah.
just want someone to like
Yeah.
tell us all the
Yep.
things. And
it feels good to be like, it's not about you, it's about me, and I'm sorry, and you deserve better, right? And you hear that and you're like, yeah, I do.
I do deserve
But then
better.
let me go do something again behind your back and then apologize again, right? And that's where I got in the cycle of not feeling stuck, but feeling like we can get to the bottom of this, right? Like we can go to therapy, we can do this. And it is interesting because that is the one thing I will say to anyone going through betrayal. Do not let words take you down that path. Like action is the only thing that I feel like truly can start to heal those. And as a woman, I want action. I don't want to be told something and have something else be happening.
I agree 100%.
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
That is, I think, the hardest lesson to learn.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of women are stuck in that trap.
Yep.
We want to be loved so bad because I think that we give so much love, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we get lost in empty words.
Yep.
And I've learned that a strong man that's healing or healed, he does what he says he's going to do.
Yep.
And I think that you've definitely learned that, right, through your new relationship, which we'll get into moving forward in a minute. But was there like a breaking point? So you chose to stay with him. You chose to work through things.
For 3 years.
For 3 years. Like what did that look like, just briefly? What did that look like? And what was that like tipping point of you going, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah. So I went through, just kind of briefly for the 3 years. I mean, we immediately went to the bishop, right? We went to therapy immediately.
Yeah.
So he was in his own therapy. I was in my own group therapy, and I was in a betrayal trauma group that I still talk to this day. They are, if I had one piece of advice, if you're going through betrayal, find a support group. It sounds super cliche, but they saved my life. Yeah. And to have someone and people to talk to outside of your family, because family will always have judgment, right? Once you open that up, it'll be like, ooh, and so to have people outside of that understand is so crucial.
Yeah.
So for about 2 years, we did therapy, right? Went through that whole process.
Yeah.
We did therapy together, things like that. And then over time is when I had found out, I knew it was getting bad, but things for the last like 2 to 3 months seemed to be going really, really well.
Yeah.
Right, because then the pornography addiction came out. So it was mostly at that point the pornography addiction.
So you didn't even know about the pornography addiction originally?
No.
Which as a woman now, I'm like, oh, if there's infidelity, most likely that starts with pornography.
Yep.
Because nobody just goes out and cheats on their spouse.
Nope.
It starts slower. It's like this slow drip and this slow, like lure
Yep.
that's just like sucking you in. And so I think that a lot of times, like as women, we're a little naive because if we aren't immersed in pornography or, you know, like we're homemakers at home with our kids, like our brains just cannot even comprehend that pornography would have such a big impact on a man or on a woman too. Cause there's women that, you know, struggle with pornography and infidelity too. I mean, it's
at our fingertips.
It is.
Yep. And it's a dopamine hit. So it's any type of addiction and people can argue pornography addictions left and right, right? But it's a dopamine hit. It's a break in reality that allows you to escape pain.
100%.
And people will chase that until they really heal. And so that is kind of how it had happened is I had, you know, found out about, you know, my situation with the nanny. And then a few weeks later is when the pornography addiction came out. You know, like I've been addicted to porn since I was little, like very little. And it's been prevalent our entire marriage. And that's when the light bulb went off a little bit where I was like, oh, okay. And that's when I start replaying like, this makes sense. I always kind of had this innate feeling like something feels a little bit off.
Yeah, a little disconnected.
Yeah. And I'm a very, very like emotionally connected person. Like I really want to connect with someone emotionally. And there always felt like there was a barrier there, especially intimately. Right. And I was just like, I don't know. I couldn't pinpoint things. And so I kind of had a big moment of like, okay.
But not everything's bad.
Yeah.
So you're like, I think what it does is it confuses a woman's innate intuition.
Yeah.
Because she's like, but he's telling me these words and like, not everything's bad, but my intuition's telling me something's off.
Yep.
But then we don't want to be wrong. Like, we don't want to be wrong. We don't want to be that like mean woman that's like something like pointing a finger. So it can be really confusing to a woman.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women go, maybe there's something wrong with me. Like maybe my internal compass is off. Like it can really trick a woman and play games with her. So it sounds like very similar to what I felt too. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like you knew something was off, but things weren't bad enough. It's like he wasn't like probably physically abusive to you or anything like that, right? It's just something that there was a disconnect that you felt.
Yep. It was just that disconnect. And then everything kind of started lining out to where I'm like, okay. And then you start diving into that, right? And you really start opening those wounds, which is really painful.
Yeah.
But yeah, about 2 years in is when I thought things were better. You know, things were going accordingly. So I really wanted a second baby. Yeah. And so I was like, let's start trying. And I always knew, right? Like, I'm going to fight for my marriage. So I was like, we're still going to deal with this, but like, I want to fight for our marriage. And so, you know, funny enough, lucky me. And I truly believe that God, like, this was all planned out perfectly. Because, like, my little one, Dylan.
You were meant to have her.
She was meant to come. And God was like, this is the chance. I got to send her now. You know? And so we had tried one time.
Boom.
Boom. And I found out 2 days later, lies.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like, okay. And I knew, like, at that point I felt done, right? And I don't think I was really done, but I felt like done, right? You know how it is. It's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. And so I was like, you need to leave. I need you to get your stuff and you need to stay somewhere else. And 3 days later, I found out I was pregnant.
Yeah.
And so I remember, you know what's weird about this too? I remember feeling somewhat ashamed of that time too.
Yeah.
I remember thinking I felt so bad for my baby that was going to come because
like, what was I thinking?
Yeah. I was like, how am I going to bring you into this world right now when your parents are not where they should be? And I remember being like so upset, but so like also like I need to create a better life for you. And so for my whole pregnancy was survival mode. It was really like trying to stick it out and just do the best and focus on myself. But then I had her, and, you know, 5 months later is when I had this moment of like, this was my last ditch effort of like, you need to get help. This is serious. Like, you need to heal your trauma. You know, we've done therapy. We've done everything up until this point. And there were other addictions involved too, right? Like, once the pornography came out, then it was nicotine, and then the addictions just kept going. And so it was like, it was progressively getting worse.
Yeah.
And when I say people think, especially in these days, like, oh, it's porn and nicotine. Like, really? Like, that was my biggest judgment, is like, seriously, like, that's what you're gonna send him to treatment for?
Yeah.
But people
Because
don't
people don't
realize,
understand
they don't
addiction.
realize. Nope.
It's so much deeper than that.
Yep.
Like, and I've recently heard this, now that I've learned about addiction, is that the addiction isn't actually the, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. It's not actually the porn and the nicotine. That's actually the cure in a way.
Yep.
They're just escaping a feeling.
Yep.
They're addicted to escaping a feeling within them because they feel empty. And so I think, you know, what I want women or anybody that is struggling with things like this to know is that don't make it mean that you're not enough, the person that's been betrayed, because that person is deeply struggling within themselves.
Yeah.
They don't know themselves. They are hurting and they're trying to escape a feeling.
Yeah.
So there doesn't need to even be shame towards them. Like, in a lot of ways, I have so much compassion, right? Like, for the pain that they're trying to escape from. And I think that that's why you stayed, because you had so much compassion and love for that, right?
Yeah.
But that at some point you have to say, I can't make you heal.
Yeah. Yep.
I need to heal. Like, my advice to women is like, heal yourself.
Yeah.
Heal the pain that you have, that you aren't enough, or that you're trying to prove your worth. Like, work on that inside of you. If you're rising as a woman, if you're healing, if you're changing, your energy shifts, everything about you shifts.
Yep.
That man will either go, whoa, and he'll change too, or he'll continue. And if he continues, you need to say, I deserve more and I'm leaving.
Yeah.
So work on that inside of yourself, which I think is what you really did.
Yeah. And it was, I think during that whole 3 years, it was like, I mean, my identity was wrapped up in addiction. As a woman, my sole purpose throughout the day was like, how can I make sure that you stay on track? Right. And it was hard. It was so hard. You talk about codependent and things like that.
Yeah.
My life revolved around like, okay, let's prevent the relapse.
Yes.
Right. And that's where I learned a lot, that we cannot control anything. Nothing is in our control. The only thing that's in our control is ourself and our healing and our process. And like you were just saying, your spouse can join you on that journey, or they can choose to go a separate way. But the only thing you control is like, where do I want to go?
And don't be blind to those red flags. Like, if you're seeing those red flags that they're not in it with you, you have to be willing to start over.
Yeah. Yep.
So what is, like you said that you were wrapped up in addiction. I want to ask you, what was your addiction? What was your vice? Because a lot of people are like, he has a problem. I don't have a problem. It's not my problem. He's the one with the problem. Let's be honest. What was your addiction here?
Ooh, that's a good question. Honestly, I think that my addiction really, I want to say that I didn't feel like the victim, because I really feel like I've moved past that. But in that time, I truly felt like I did become addicted to the victim mentality. And I really did believe, like, I was mad at so many people, right? Like, the situation itself, the circumstance, that like
People didn't treat you the way you wanted to be treated.
Yeah. And that I felt like I was doing all this work and getting the same results. And so I just kept feeling, I felt so stuck, and I really did almost become addicted to the chaos. And even now I find myself being like, you get so used to the up and down of things that when things are good, it's like, whoa, you know, like you still kind of are like, whoa, this feels weird. I feel uneasy feeling settled.
Like, this is too good.
Yeah.
When's the other shoe gonna drop? Like, because you've been so addicted to the chaos for so long that you don't actually believe that life can actually be really good.
It actually feels uncomfortable when things are good.
It does.
I found myself being like,
I felt that so many times, like in the past. So that really resonates with me.
Yeah. So that's hard. And it is interesting because, like, and to kind of circle back to like where I had my profound moment of like no longer continuing. I've never really struggled with like anxiety or panic attacks or anything. But after he got done with treatment and he came back for that month and a half, I knew, like, if you go back to this, I'm done, right? Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I remember it was Christmas Eve. I found a bunch of stuff on his phone, right, and everything. And it wasn't just that. I remember it was the day after, on how we talked about it, that he was not there for me. There was no support. And I think that's the hardest part, is it's your spouse that's hurting you, but you're looking for comfort in your spouse.
Yeah.
And that alone is painful. So when they don't show up for you how you want, that's where it's like you feel so alone. And so I remember in that moment, it was New Year's Eve, and I can't remember the exact thing that happened, but I remember getting in the bathtub and having a full-on panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so scary to me. I'd never felt that way. And like I just remember like grabbing like the side of the tub and the curtain to try and like calm my breathing. And I knew in my heart of hearts, like I called my dad from the bathtub, and my husband was in the other room, and I couldn't even go to him. I'm like, I need help. Like I can't.
You told
do
your dad
this.
that?
Yeah. And I'm like, and I knew in that moment it was literally my spirit being like, you are done. You've done everything you can do.
Yeah.
You have to move forward. And so it was literally the next morning, I was like, we're separating. I'm moving my finances. And at that time, I even still had hope that he would somehow figure it out and somehow make it back
and
to
maybe
me.
make it back to you.
Yeah, I really did still have that hope, even though
Yeah.
at that point I was detached, and I was like, at that time I had an 8-month-old baby and a 3-year-old, and I'm like, I have to change my life. And someone had asked me this. They said, "Are you okay being in the same position you are a year from now?" And I remember like it was a profound moment where I'm like, I can't even fathom.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I have to change, and it's going to be so painful. And yeah, it was about 2 weeks later that he kind of just, I don't want to say went off the rails, but like once I made that boundary clear and he felt like he had lost that, I think he just was like, I'm done. I don't want to put in the work.
He didn't feel like he could manipulate you
or... Yep. And I think that was the difference.
That he
the
wasn't...
sorries worked for so long. And I think the second it was like, wow, she's moving on and she's going to do this. Like, it was an instant reality check for me. Yeah. That it was me holding on to the relationship. And there was really no... There was really no work done on his part. It was me just waiting. It was waiting for the idea of who I wanted him to be and not who he really was showing me he was.
I think this is the biggest thing that hold us back, is that we don't take people for what they're actually really showing us.
Yep.
Because we fall in love with their potential.
Yep.
And I think there is a point in a marriage too where you have to be in love with who they are now, and also as a woman be able to have that vision of like who they could be and help support them to grow as an individual.
Yep.
So I think that it's a really good thing that women have to be able to see a man's potential. But if who they are now is like a polar opposite, like they're not even trying.
Yeah.
That's when you're like, oh, okay, like they're hurting me now though. So you have to be really clear on where they're at right now.
Yeah.
But it sounds to me like that moment in the bath for you, like that was divine inspiration.
Yeah.
From like really a higher power. So I want to ask you, like, how has your faith helped you, choose to move on or choose to move forward or to rebuild when you had $2,000 in your bank account and you were like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, do you feel like your faith played a role in that for you?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up really religious, and so that's always been my base. It's always been my backbone of life and all those things. And that was rocked a little, right? Like, you get married in the temple and you experience those things, and it's like, well, this is my celestial partner.
Yeah.
How do you explain this now, right? And I remember I've always had such a bigger picture than just, religion itself. And I genuinely believe that when this all started happening and I really chose to start moving forward with my life, I remember I just laid on the floor in my room. And I remember just saying, like, God, I have no idea what I'm going to do and how I'm going to make this work. But I trust that even if it gets worse, that there's a plan and that there is a roadmap for me to get there. And I just had this feeling that my life was going to go in my favor. And I think that I felt so much peace knowing that I did everything I could, and I hit the end for myself. I couldn't go any further in that relationship, and that's what gave me peace walking away, is knowing I did what I could. And I love the saying to let go and let God.
Yes.
Because at that point, I had no control of my life, right?
Which sounds like exactly what you did in
Yeah.
that prayer was, I'm giving this to you, God.
Yeah.
I'm trusting you to steer my life.
Yep.
Like, I think there's something so powerful in that. We oftentimes want things to make sense. And for me, from my experience, it didn't really make sense. But I did the same thing. Like, God, where do you want this to go? What do you want me to do? Like, I surrender. I give it to you. Like, you know better for me than I do.
Yeah.
So steer me.
Yeah.
Show me where to go. Like, I'll paddle. I'll do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not just going to sit back and do nothing. I'm going to be rowing. I'm going to be paddling hard.
Yeah.
Will you steer me?
Yeah.
Because I feel so lost right now.
Yep.
And that really was a big shift for me too in my story.
Yep.
So,
and I really do believe that when we start aligning with that, because I went back and forth all the time. I was like, God, do I stay? Am I meant to stay longer? Right?
yeah.
And should I have left sooner? Like, I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
And I really believe that when we start aligning that ourselves, because we can't align together sometimes, but when we align ourselves, I really do think that God puts the path right in front of us.
Oh, I do too.
Right in front of us.
But I also want to say that there was a purpose to you staying, because I know that you've probably been like, why didn't I leave sooner? And I was so stupid. And you have shame around, being the victim and staying and being sucked into the trap of his words. But I want to say that, like, there is a purpose sometimes in staying, because you are learning lessons. You are learning things about yourself. You are getting your baby girl.
Yep.
There were things that you still needed to experience to learn from. And the moment you learned it, you were ready to move on.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's timing in all things.
Yep.
Like, when you're ready to let go, when you're ready to really learn everything and see things as they are and stop fighting with reality and see the red flags, then you're like, okay, I'll move on. I'm going to give it to God. I'm going to have trust. I'm going to surrender. And I'm going to move and step into this unknown of being a single mom, doing it on my own, making money, figuring it out. Like, is love possible again? Like, because I know for me, like, I know I chose to stay, but there was a period of time where I was so hurt by so many relationships in my life that I had lost hope that, like, love was even available to me.
Yeah.
Or that I could ever trust anybody ever again with my heart. And so how did you decide to trust again? Like, and overcome those deep emotions and process that and move into not only doing it on your own, but also, like, letting somebody in? Because I know your story is that you did find love pretty quickly.
Yep.
And you shared about it online, and people were, everyone's like, rebound, you're so stupid, what are you doing? All the things, you're not ready, and they want to judge you. But you're like, no, I'm aligned with God and I'm following my intuition. My intuition's telling me this. I don't care what anybody else says. So how did you know that you were ready to move on and do things on your own? That was a lot of questions, but
I think in general, I had started aligning myself more with who I wanted to be before my marriage even ended.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like when that started happening, although it was in the midst of just pure chaos with the divorce, and like you said, the unknown is huge. I didn't know what was going to happen the next week, right? I didn't know if I was going to keep my house. I didn't know how I was going to provide for my girls, right? I've always worked. I went to cosmetology school and I've always done lashes. So I've had stay-at-home job where I brought in income and had my girls. But I didn't have a college degree, and I had this, like, how am I going to provide moment, all these things. But it's like the second I got divorced, I had this hyper independence come over me where I was like, I know that I can do this, and I know that I can make a life for my girls, and I don't need someone else. I can make it all work. And I don't know why, this flip switched, and it's probably just that motherly intuition where I was like, I'm going to set up a fail-proof life for myself and the girls.
Yeah.
And I had that moment too. Energy, like, came out in, like, who I wanted to be and what I wanted my relationship to look like. And so for those that don't know, we started the divorce process in February, and I met my now boyfriend April 1st. So the crazy part is I had no intentions of dating. I had no intentions of meeting someone.
Yeah.
And this is exactly where I say I think God's hand is perfect, because our story of coming together is crazy.
Yeah.
And we both just went out one night, super, super random. I went out with my girlfriends, And, you know, he had just moved here. And so he had like so randomly went out and we connected on just a very, very friendship based level at first. I mean, obviously there was an attraction there. Like that is definitely
he's a cutie. You're like,
cutie.
okay,
I'm like,
he's
yes,
cute. But it was
course.
like, it was deeper than that,
Yeah.
right? It was
and I told him, I was like, my life is a mess and this is, you know, what I'm going through and all those things. But I think the one thing that I just think for me in my head, I never wanted to hold resentment for that experience for the rest of my life. I knew that I wanted to let go, and I didn't want someone else's choices to stain my experiences with other people. And I never wanted to project those trust issues. And it's hard, right? Like it's super hard.
That is hard to do. That reminds me of the quote, don't hate the experience that shaped you.
Yeah.
Because that experience is what made you into the amazing woman you are today. Even though it was painful.
Yeah.
Like, look at you. Look at what you've been able to create now.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, too, that the fact that you attracted a man into your life that does treat you right, it goes to show that, like, we really are magnetic forces. Yeah. Like, there's an energy where when we really do that change deep within ourselves, like you said, you were changing as a person before you even chose to leave him and do it on your own. You were doing the work to change. And as you changed and shifted, like, God prepared like a whole new reality for you because you started attracting something brand new that was now matching your energy.
Yeah.
And I think that that is so powerful because we oftentimes get so stuck in resentment, bitterness, pain, trauma, poor me, victimhood, that we continually attract that into our life because that's what our energetic match is. But when we actually go, I'm going to rise above this. I'm not going to hold on to that. I'm not going to let it define me. I'm going to love the experience that shaped me into who I am. And we have that shift. Beautiful things can unfold.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not limited to your past experience.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's what was so sacred about meeting my now boyfriend is that I always knew, I'm like, I'm going to lay it out there. This is who I am. This is my experience. This is what I'm going through. And whoever is ready to step up to the plate for that is going to. I didn't feel like I needed to shy away from my experience because I'm like, I want to truly be loved for who I am and everything. And so when we talk about trust, I think, again, this process for me was so sacred because I met him through my divorce. And to watch how he was, because he was by my side through court and mediation and all of the horrible, messy parts.
Your boyfriend was?
Yeah. Which
How cool.
is interesting because I'm kind of a firm believer, like, I'm not going to date until I'm divorced, right? Like, that was never a thing.
Yeah.
But for him to stand by my side through something like that, I feel like alone says a lot about a man.
It does.
And he got to see the really, really hard parts of me. And I was still
support
healing.
you through it.
Yeah. I was not healed when I met him. And I think that's a key factor is we think we need to be healed before we can let someone love us. And we're never going to stop healing. Like, I'm going to have parts of me that are never fully healed. Yeah. Right? I still feel big emotions over things sometimes. But for him to hold space for me through that and to know my story right off the bat.
Probably built a lot of trust.
It built so much trust.
Right? Because I think it's like, trust is such an interesting thing. How do you fully trust if someone doesn't fully see you?
Yeah.
But when they fully see like your low lows and they see all of it and they still accept you. Yeah. To me, I'm like, that's love. Yeah. And that's how you build trust.
Yep. And I think it allowed him also to see my wounds as a man and to see like, I need to love and care for her in ways that someone else didn't. Yeah. And that was also kind of a cool part because I think he naturally does that, but he also saw that really raw side. Yeah. And the trauma and the betrayal and the trust and all those things. And so for him to really see that firsthand is like, I need to step up. I need to do those things, you know? And so.
And he's been there for your girls.
Yeah. Yep.
Like a father figure would, right?
Yep. They absolutely adore him. And I did keep that private for a long time because I met him and it was messy and, you know, I wasn't planning on meeting someone. And so I didn't introduce him to my girls for, you know, a little over 4 months to protect them. And I think that was the hard part is I'm like, they have so much change that I wanted to make sure that this was something that was going to progress.
Yeah.
And they absolutely adore him. Like, he has been above and beyond what any like father figure could be, especially coming from a guy that's, is single.
Doesn't
He
have
doesn't have
kids.
kids.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 little kids fresh off divorce,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we feel like a family. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my life does feel whole,
Mm-hmm.
even though we do have a super non-traditional family,
Yeah.
right? Like, we do have a lot of differences,
Mm-hmm.
and we come from different like backgrounds, different ethnicities, different religions,
Yeah.
and yet he's something that I have.
Like, it goes against everything
Yeah,
that you thought, but
yeah,
you're like, this feels right.
yep. And he has every characteristic that I would want in a man and for my kids. And like, truly, he's kind of a unicorn of a man, if I'm being honest, though.
Yeah.
And something that we did right off the bat is I laid it all out there. I'm like, how much do you watch porn?
Yeah.
Just tell me. This is
Yes.
something that we will talk about frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being like, I will not tolerate lying. So that's something that I truly feel like once that barrier is broken with lying, and trust is the most sacred thing. And I told him off the bat, like, I don't think I really realized how much I value trust. Like, it is the top thing. I don't think it's the most sacred thing you could ever hold for someone.
Yes.
And once you break that, it's very hard to get back. Very hard.
I agree.
And so that was my ask with him, is like, please, I feel like I can work through so many things.
Yeah.
If I know we can do it together.
I think most women can. Like, most women are willing to work through really hard things. Like, if you mess up or what, like, say, like, a man's been married to someone for 5 years and he messes up and looks at porn. If he goes to her right away and is like, whoa, I kind of got drawn in. I think most women are willing to work through things with men. It's the fact of lying repeatedly and making you feel like something's wrong with you, or like you're crazy, or making you lose touch with yourself and your own intuition because you can't quite figure out what's going on. Like, that messes with a person, right? But most women really are willing to work through hard things. They want to hold space for you. And I think that relationships that last, you talk about everything. Like, you see each other, you show each other like the depth of everything. That is how relationships last.
Yeah.
If relationships are surfacey, and it doesn't matter, you can be having like great sex, you can have like a beautiful home and all the things, but if under the surface of all of that, like, things are just shallow and they're not, there's no depth to it, there's no intimacy to it of like trust and love and understanding and working through those things, it crumbles. You have to have way more depth to make a marriage last.
And I think it shows so much about a person that says, hey, I messed up, but instead of protecting my own peace and so what people think, right, instead of protecting myself right now, I did something that may have hurt you, and I care about your feelings. I think that's the biggest thing, is it takes away that I have to question my reality. Instead, I know my reality, and I have ground to work now.
Totally.
And so that's where it does change, is can we be open and honest and vulnerable when we do fall short, because we do respect our partner, and that's the difference for me.
I think so too. And I think it's having something that you're like a common goal of what you want your life to be, something that you're constantly working towards, right? Like, there is, like, you can get really complacent if there's not a common direction. So having that direction of, because it's so easy for a man to be like, I'm the provider, I go to work, I do this, and you do this, and then just to kind of like separate it. But what are you guys working towards together, and do you have that common ground? I think that's really important.
It is.
In a relationship. It
is very much. And I think that's even harder now, especially because we do have to navigate different things, right? Like, my now boyfriend and my girls and everything, like, we do have different roles that we have to establish, because there is, their dad in their life that still we have to work around that. But then, we have the girls full time and we raise them together, and creating those boundaries on roles as a stepfather and all those things, and, explaining to our girls, like, just the differences in that, and making sure that they're comfortable and that they're asking the right questions. And I mean, it's also hard to go through divorce because it's just one more added thing on already hard things, right? With your family in general.
So how do you feel that you handle that with like not, I mean, I don't know your full story, so maybe this is a lot to ask, but like my parents went through a divorce and I was older. It was right before me and Matt got married actually. But there was kind of a process, of them separating and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like a lot of their feelings towards each other was put onto the children.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe because your girls are younger, that didn't happen. Maybe it's because I was older.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how do you navigate that? Because you don't want your kids to be naive to the fact that their dad is struggling,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that he's not there for them, and or you want them to know like there's certain things that should never happen, right? But then you also you don't want to create like this hate and resentment towards their
Mm-hmm.
dad, or um, have that constant energy in your home.
Yeah.
So like how have you navigated that of like, do you feel like it's been pretty peaceful? Do you feel like you're able to separate that and still like be there for your girls without like constantly shaming their dad? Like how do you handle that? How do you navigate that?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think this is the one area I can give myself a lot of props in.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my girls have had a very, very healthy environment with our divorce. And I take pride in making sure my girls are safe. And I never wanted to, I never wanted adult issues
Yeah.
to affect them, right? And I think as parents, that when bringing children into the world, my biggest letdown was feeling like I had a job to do for my kids and to provide them a certain upbringing. And I somewhat felt like I failed them in that because they were going to have to grow up in a different environment.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I worked through those feelings, it became I'm going to kind of put a twist on, oh, my parents got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really going to be my parents got divorced and we get to have a relationship with mom and dad, right? And we are going to foster that and create a healthy environment for them.
Yeah.
And they're going to know stability and security and safety.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make sure that they are safe and comfortable in asking questions. But they are little, so I think the questions are going to be a little different. But the impact is still there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like my little 6-year-old Harley, she does ask questions and she does associate things in the timeline of which her dad lived with us.
Yeah.
And I talk very highly about their dad in the sense of, he loves you.
That's
and,
good.
Like
Daddy loves you.
Yeah, daddy loves you and mommy loves you. And, we are always going to be there for you. And we don't, because they're so little, I just think it does alleviate some of those questions.
Yeah. And maybe they'll have some as they're older.
Yeah.
But I think that that's so important to do, right? And I think that there's a gift in them seeing their mom choose love over chaos.
Yeah.
Because I know that like especially growing up in religion, there's this idea that like divorce is bad and it creates chaos. Well, what about the chaos that you were living in? Because your kids were feeding off of that and they were feeling that. And so sometimes staying together is actually worse for the children, in my opinion.
Yep.
Like I felt like growing up with my parents, I didn't feel like they really loved each other. I felt like there was a lot of chaos there. And so that taught me a lot of negative things about what love was growing up. And it's taken me a long time to kind of figure out what really love is, what a relationship really looks like, and how I can provide that for my children. And so you're creating this gift for your kids by saying, this isn't love actually.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to believe that this is what a relationship looks like.
Yeah.
Let me show you what a healthy relationship actually looks like.
Yeah.
A healthy relationship with your father is me creating boundaries. A healthy relationship with love is me actually being in a relationship where I'm valued and where they treat me good and where they love me and where they take care of me.
Yep.
And so you're really giving your girls a gift.
Yeah. And I love that you say that because there has been a profound kind of idea or term that I've used in my life. There's a movie called Collateral Beauty.
I've never heard of it.
It's stuck with me for so long because we all go through so much hard and we can get stuck in that hard. Like we can live and say, I got divorced and my girls will never have, this full family that we think is this ideal family and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of collateral beauty is that if we can stop to look at the chaos around us and realize the beauty that comes with it, I think is really where we change the mindset of trauma, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I look at my situation and I look at where I am now and where I thought I would be, right? Like years ago, it's like this was all perfectly orchestrated for the betterment of my life and for the betterment of my girls. And we've always said like they just have more people to love them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, with
I love
my
that.
boyfriend, it's like he fosters the relationship with their dad very well. And he always says like, I'm also, can be your dad too, but you have your dad and he loves you. And so we just speak very, very like, they don't need to know details of things right now. And I've always said that kids will ask questions based on what they're ready to hear. And that's when you can answer. We don't need to put them full of all this stuff that they don't understand.
And they'll pick up on things down the road. Like if there's things that are off with their dad, or they'll pick up on it.
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh, dad's not really there for me the way that you are. And maybe he'll heal and change, and maybe he will be. But we don't need to project our hurt onto them.
Yep.
And that's one thing I've tried really hard not to do through my experience, is not to play the victim and project hurt. Like, and none of us are perfect, but I really think that whether you are divorced, whether you separate, whether you move on, or whether you stay together and heal together, I really think it can be done with love and done in a way that creates healing. Like you said, like you never thought that you would be able to get to the point that you are now, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I also think that's the reason why so many women stay, because they cannot envision a better life.
Yeah.
They're like, how could there be anything better out there? How could I create anything from this? Like, there's so much fear and scarcity around, how will I do it on my own? How will I provide on my own? Will I ever find love again? Will I ever trust again? Like, there's so much fear.
All questions I ask myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we end up staying in a familiar hell.
Yep.
Because we're so scared of an unfamiliar heaven.
Yep.
Right? Like, we're like, is it possible to have more? And you are proof that there is.
Yeah.
It is possible to have more and to create something beautiful out of chaos.
Yeah. And I do love that, because I think that we get like the experience that we have, and I've always said this too, especially for that moment where I, it's like, why did that happen to me? Right? We like to ask ourselves, why did that happen to me? And now being on the other side of it, in the journey that I'm at now, at this point, I could have never seen a different outcome. And now I look at that and I'm like, that didn't happen to me. It happened for me.
Yes.
And that's where I'm like, it all came together to get me where I am now. And so it's just a reminder that like the experiences that we have right now are not the only experiences that we will ever have. And we get stuck in that because we don't know any different, but it's just an experience. And that's what my mom has always said, like, we're here on this earth to have experiences, and they're not good or bad. They're just experiences. They
are, yeah.
But we like to chalk it up to, again, why that happened to me.
Or my life's horrible. Everything's always horrible. I always get the short end of the stick. And we can really fall into that victim mentality, right? And I think that shows real healing on your part, to be able to say, all of this was for my good. And it says that in the scriptures, right? It says that God will use everything for your good. And when we have that type of faith of, all of this is working in my favor, and this experience is shaping me into who I am supposed to be, but also like I have to be the person that attracts the life and creates the life that I want. And ultimately that experience is that's what it did for you, is that gave you the knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding to be able to attract now what you are attracting and creating in your life. And that's the beauty in it, right? And so that simple mindset shift, and because I talk a lot online about like not being a victim, and that makes some people angry, right? And I'm like, I get it. I believe in extreme ownership and accountability in my life too, of if I'm attracting things into my life, why am I attracting that into my life? Like, what things am I ignoring? What red flags am I ignoring? What things am I looking past? What boundaries am I letting just be crossed all the time? Like, if I'm continually getting this result, why? Like, what do I need to change about myself? And I think that when we can do that, and we can shift from victim to the creators of our reality, then that is when the shifts happen.
Yep.
So
yep. And
you're proof of that.
Yeah. I get that question all the time. Like, how did you meet someone so fast? And how do you have the job that you have? And I do think that people think that just happened. It just fell in my lap, right? And I do believe that, like you said, we create our outcomes. It didn't
fall in your lap.
Yeah.
You were an energetic match for it.
Yeah. Yep. And you do get what you put out in the universe. And I think that because I had that mindset of like, I'm going to create a life for me and my girls, regardless of anyone, right? I have hardly any money in my account. I don't have any direction. And I just knew that I had to put one foot in front of the other, and I had a goal in mind. And I had things come my way because of what I was putting out and because of things that I took a leap of faith on.
And because you were rowing, you had faith.
Yeah.
But then you were also like, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to do the work.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't just sit back and say, okay, got to fix this.
Yeah.
No, you paddled hard, right?
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about how you ended up buying your home back from your ex.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty powerful.
It was like a moment that I still sometimes, like, I don't know how I was capable of making that all come together. It was funny because previous to our divorce, he had said, you can keep the house, right? Yeah. Until we sell, and then, or until you want to sell, and then we'll split the equity and whatever. But he's like, you keep it, you stay in the girls. And a week before mediation, it was kind of brought up, like, you need to sell the house. I want my money. I want my portion. Yeah. And I remember I was bawling because that felt like such a, what am I going to do? There's already so much change. How am I going to make this work? Where am I going to go? Right. It's just such a punch to the gut on an already horrible situation. And in mediation, I remember us running numbers for any type of way that we could buy him out or do anything in that moment. And I remember they ran numbers on what I was making then, and they're like, yeah, sorry. And I just sat there bawling, and the mediator was like, she was able to get 6 months. So from about September to March, I had until March that I could either sell the house, which I was planning on, or I could find a way to buy him out. And because my life switched and I had a career switch right in October, which was like a few weeks after mediation, I had an amazing full-time job. And in those 6 months progressed like quite a bit to where I was able to take a HELOC out of my home and
pay him back.
And I qualified for that by myself based on,
that gave me chills.
I know. And I remember like sitting there and talking to the loan officer and being like, this is what I have. I gave him, my pay stubs and all this stuff. And I remember thinking, like, I think I can do this. Like, I think that I'm going to, be able to take this out. Yeah. And I remember getting approved, and it was such a big moment for me, especially coming from someone who, I didn't have a career, right?
Yeah. I didn't have an education.
No. And you think, like, you got to start at the bare minimum and work your way up. And I jumped into a job that I didn't have experience in.
Yeah.
And I learned things that I'm like, still to this day, I'm like, I can't believe I have knowledge in this much business. And
which is such a gift, even if you move on down the road, like the things that you've learned is such a gift.
Yep. And so I remember qualifying, and I got the loan, and I remember the day that it was finalized and they paid him out. And it was like, I literally got him off the title. Like, I own my home in full, and it was, it was.
And you have full custody of your girls?
I do have full custody.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So again, super blessed, because I feel like our lives are pretty normal.
Yeah.
Like, it's
such an incredible story.
Yeah.
That you've been able to overcome like every fear.
Yeah.
I always say, like, a woman that can face like her deepest fears and insecurities and come out on top is like a woman you don't mess with, because she's going places. And you are like, I see that in you. Like, it's so attractive in you, Jalissa. And I know it's attractive to other people. Like, you're giving so many people hope on your platform, because there's so many women that are in this situation and are so fearful, and it's lending them hope that maybe I can make something beautiful out of this chaos, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe I can start over, and like, she did it, so I'm going to try to do it.
Yeah.
So, because, I have seen a lot of stories that have gone the other way,
Mm-hmm.
where they're faced with situations similar to yours and they become the addict.
Mm-hmm.
They become, you know,
Yeah.
the person that's now drinking, or, they just kind of let things go, and
Yeah.
they don't rise, they
Yeah.
lower their standard because they were so hurt. And I get it, I get it, but it's like, I just want to lend hope to women or to men
Mm-hmm.
that are going, because men get hurt too.
Yeah.
And they get used, right, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they get betrayed and then they have to pay all this money and they're hurt too. So I'm not
Yeah.
saying this only happens to women, but I just want to lend our stories of hope that you can come out
Yeah.
better if you let go of the resentment, you let go of the anger, you let go of the victimhood, and you decide to do something better than what you received, to give more than what you got. Like, that's so hard to do,
Yeah.
but it's possible.
Yeah. And that's why I love, there's a saying that says, it kind of breaks down the meaning of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you can fear everything and run, or face everything and rise.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful statement too, that no matter what we are dealt or given, we do have a choice.
We do.
Like 100%. If you stay, you have a choice.
Yes.
And if you leave, you have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them are going to be hard. And I think that's the one thing to say, is like, both of them are hard and both of them are challenging. But like you said, we get to be the creators of our story, regardless.
Regardless. I totally agree. And I love that you were vulnerable enough to come on today and share that, because I have stayed, I want people to also see the opposite of what it looks like to start over.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't believe there's one right choice.
Yep.
Each person's story is so individual to them, and there's a path of healing and staying. There's a path of healing and leaving, and both can be done out of love.
Yep.
And you are such a perfect example of that. Where can people find you if they want to follow your story?
Yeah. So on my Instagram, it's Jalissa.Deveraux.
Okay.
And that's pretty much where I have all of my story. So
Yeah.
I've posted, again, not like nitty gritty details, but a lot of my journey up until now in relationships and everything. So Instagram, and I do have a TikTok. I'm not as up to date, but same thing, Jalissa.Deveraux on TikTok and Facebook and all of the fun stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming today and being a guest.
Yep.
I hope to do more things with you in the future where we can share more with people. But thank you so much for coming today, and I hope you guys go follow her, because her page is amazing. So
thank you. Thanks, Nicole.
Yep.